Hello, guys. We're going to start reading chapter 13 and see what happens now that they're in Washington, D.C. Dr. Zemer's apartment was on 12th Street, just half a mile or so from the museum. At first, it seemed very strange to hear all the cars going past the window all night long. I guess in a city, there's always somebody awake, no matter how late it is. You don't notice the noise in the daytime, but when you lie in bed in the dark, all those traffic sounds come in the window and the glow of the lights goes back and forth on the ceiling. It used to keep me awake at first, but after a while, I got used to it. My first job was to take Uncle Beasley for a walk. Now that we were keeping him shut up in a room in the museum, Dr. Zimmer said it was especially important to see that he got some exercise and fresh air every day. We could do the outdoors until cold weather came, and then we'd have to exercise him indoors after that. But of course, it wouldn't do to stroll around the city streets with that dinosaur in the daytime. Dr. Zemer said the people in Washington weren't too accustomed to a live dinosaur. There might be all kinds of crowds and confusion, and we might get in trouble with the police. Besides, Dr. Kennedy wanted to keep Uncle Beasley out of sight as much as we could. He didn't want a whole lot of people piling into the museum and getting in the way. The way I look at it, Dr. Kennedy kept saying, is that we've got to protect this animal from the public. If they if the public gets to know we've got a live dinosaur here, they'd be swarming all over the place, endangering his health and getting in our way all the time. And the public wouldn't have any scientific interest in the dinosaur. They would just come and gawk at him. And that's why I haven't told the newspapers what we've got here. We might as well keep this thing quiet until we've had a chance to study the dinosaur for a while. I haven't even told the police about it yet. Well, we decided that the best time to exercise Uncle Beasley was early in the morning, before people were out on the streets. So every morning I would get out of bed at about 5 o'clock while it was pretty dark outside. Then I'd get dressed and eat some breakfast and walk over to the museum. It's pretty nice in the city early in the morning like that, when there's hardly anybody around and the streets are all quiet and empty. I would walk down 12th Street and across Pennsylvania Avenue and then across Constitution Avenue, and there I'd be at the National Museum. I would go in the back door and tell the night watchman that I was going to take the dinosaur out, and he would hold the door open for us as we went out. He used to stand behind the door too because he never did like to get too close to Uncle Beasley. I don't see how you dare go around with that big fellow, he told me. I could make mincemeat. He could make mincemeat out of you in no time. Oh, he's pretty tame, I said. He wouldn't hurt anything unless he got excited. He knows me pretty well. You see, I've taken care of him ever since he was hatched. We'd usually walk for half an hour or so on the mall, which is what they call the big open space with all the grass in between the Capitol and the Washington Monument. Usually there wouldn't be anybody else there except perhaps a man way off walking his dog down the General Grant statue, or now and then a milk truck going by. When we'd been out long enough, I'd take Uncle Beasley back into the museum and have him all safely back in his room before most people were out in the streets. When Dr. Seymour arrived at the museum in the morning, he would give me some scientific thing to find out about, like the life cycle of a butterfly, or the formation of coal, or how the glaciers covered North America. And then I would hunt around the museum and find an exhibit about it and study it pretty carefully, or perhaps draw a picture of it. Then I'd go back to Dr. Zemer and tell him what I found out. After that, I could go to the office of the museum superintendent, and he would give me some of the museum accounts to figure out. And when I had done some of them, the secretary used to let me work them out on the adding machine to see if my answers were right. I really learned a lot in the museum, and it was more fun than school. Sometimes when Dr. Zemer had some free time, he would take me to places like the Archives Building or the Supreme Court. And after I got to know my way around a little, I went to a lot of places by myself. The place I liked the best was the Jefferson Memorial. It's a big round building right beside a kind of a bay they call the Tidal Basin, and it's all made of white marble. I think they said the marble came from Vermont, but I liked it anyway. Inside, there's a statue of Thomas Jefferson, and one of his sayings is carved around the inside of the dome. I can't remember the exact words, but the general idea was that he didn't think much of making up other people's minds for them. Dr. Zemer said he liked the building best too. Well, things went along like that for about 2 weeks, and Uncle Beasley was growing all the time. We tried out different kinds of feed on him because it was too hard to get fresh grass, and we finally decided on alfalfa. with about 50 pounds of poultry mash for dessert. He used to eat up about 4 bags of alfalfa a day, along with about 10 gallons of water. I never saw such an appetite. By September 25th, he measured 16 feet and weighed 2,674 pounds. His upper horns were almost as long as my arms, and the lower horn on his nose was about half as long. His head was about 3 feet long, and the bone collar had grown up over his neck and shoulders. He was terribly strong. We had given up using the leather collar and the cow chain because we couldn't find a collar big enough for his neck. And besides, he would easily break the chain if he wanted to. Instead of that, I used to tie a piece of rope around his left upper horn and lead him that way. If he ever had really wanted to go somewhere else when I was leading him, I couldn't have done a thing about it. Dr. Zemer said that dinosaurs had very small brains and weren't very bright. But Uncle Beasley knew me and trusted me, so he would follow me around. That was a lucky thing because I sure couldn't pull him. In the early mornings, sometimes there was nobody else around. I would climb up on Uncle Beasley's back and have a ride. The easiest way to get up was to put my left foot on the base of the big horns, grab a hold of his bone collar, and swing up his back. It was kind of a slope forward, but his skin was pretty rough, like coarse sandpaper. That kept me from sliding too much. I could steer him by pulling left or right on the rope. He didn't move very fast, so there wasn't much danger of running into things. Then one morning, a dreadful thing happened. I think it was almost the end of the month, and I'd taken Uncle Beasley out as usual for his morning exercise. It was very misty, close to the ground, but higher up in the air was clear. I could see the top of the Washington Monument high up in the air. I climbed up on Uncle Beasley, and he started walking along slowly. I headed him towards the Washington Monument. It was kind of fun on a morning like this because all the big buildings on each side of the mall, like the Interstate Commerce Building and the Department of Agriculture, fade away into the mist and look like gray cliffs and rocks. And I can imagine I was a prehistoric man riding around, discovering new places and things. It was pretty exciting, but not anywhere near as exciting as it was going to be a little later. When I got to 14th Street, I got off and led my dinosaur across just in case a car might be coming along. Then I climbed up again and we headed up the hill that leads to the monument. I could feel the dinosaur shoulders moving under me, and I could see the big muscles of his legs and neck sliding around under his thick hide. When we reached the top of the hill, I let Uncle Beasley have a little rest. The mist was thinning out some, and I could look across the tidal basin and see the Jefferson Memorial, but it was pretty faint in the gray light. I thought I would ride down toward the tidal basin and look at it closer. Everything went fine until I got to Independence Avenue where 15th Street crosses it. The traffic light was green, so I thought it was safe to ride across, and I started over. Uncle Beasley lumbered along, minding his own business, and we were about halfway across the street. A pickup truck came along and stopped just to the right of us. That made me kind of uneasy, for Uncle Beasley wasn't supposed to be seen in public if we could help it, and I wanted to get him out of sight as quickly as possible. But Uncle Beasley was as slow, and the light changed on us before we made the other side of Independence Avenue. That was when the driver of the pickup made his big mistake. Instead of just waiting for us to move out of the way, he blew his horn right in Uncle Beasley's ear almost. Then Uncle Beasley went into action. He never did like horns being blown at him, and he swung right around, came over beside the pickup truck. He put his big head down and just pitched the truck over onto his side as if it was no trouble at all. The driver climbed out the window, ran down the street yelling bloody murder. I slid right off Dinosaur's back and led him around to the other side of the truck and got him to lift it right side up again. Then I pulled hard on Uncle Beasley's rope and got him back across Independence Avenue as fast as I could. I couldn't see the truck driver around anywhere, so I headed back to the museum. I had a feeling there was going to be trouble, and I wanted to have Uncle Beasley safely back in his room when it started. As soon as Dr. Zemer came in, I told him what happened. He nodded his head. We had to expect something like that sooner or later, he said. The dinosaur really isn't built to fit into modern traffic conditions. He has plenty of horsepower, but he doesn't have the speed. The Triceratops didn't have to depend on speed. They were quiet, stubborn type, and they liked to mind their own business until something tried to push them around, and then watch out. They didn't have the power for nothing, I can tell you. He looked over me and chuckled. People are like that too sometimes, Nate, particularly up where you come from. It would have been all right, I said, if that man hadn't blown his horn right beside us. That was what did it. Uncle Beasley just turned right around and butted the truck over. If only people wouldn't blow horns that way. The doctor smiled. Horn blowing is part of modern traffic, I guess. People pay good money for those horns, so they figured they had the right to use them. What do you suppose the people will do? I wondered. I suspect they will tell us to keep our dinosaur off the streets, but we'd have to give up the morning walks anyway pretty soon because the weather will be too cold. Don't worry, Nate, he said. We'll handle this all right. I couldn't help worrying, though, some, though, because you never can be too sure the police are going to understand about dinosaurs and things like that. So we'll see what happens in our next chapter. Talk to you later.